Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. So today we have landed at part 3 of our review series on the Immsource ET3, ET5 and FD1 steering wheels. So over the last couple of videos, we've had a look at the hardware in detail. We've taken a look at the software and the driving experience in detail as well, and taking you through, I guess, objectively all the things that we think are going to be important for you to make the right decision on these products. Today's video is all about discussing our conclusions from our experience, as well as, of course, some comparisons with other products which may be worth your consideration if you're looking for something that fulfills the same kind of criteria as what we're looking at here. So let's get started. Okay, so first things first, just to make sure you guys have the full picture, the full context of exactly what's going on here. All the products that we're going to be talking about today have been sent across to us from the various different manufacturers for us to check out and produce our review content. So a big thank you to Immsource for sending across this stuff, as well as the other brands which we'll be mentioning in today's video. So let's get started here. We've spent quite a bit of time experimenting, looking at the hardware, looking at the driving experience, the software. So what were your overall impressions?
Well, I guess to start with, the overall hardware quality is really good. It's always nice to see the NRG style quick release.
The
quick release
that is
awesome.
Definitely a favorite.
And I know you were particularly excited about there being absolutely no pins or anything on there. That was
Yeah, I really like what they've done. I mean, it does add complexity to the hardware overall, because we've got a induction setup for the hub, and then we've got a secondary induction setup for inductive coupling setup, I should say, to get power across into the wheel. And check out part 1 if you want to see more details on exactly how that works. Now, we have seen a similar kind of design utilized in various other different wheelbases, but it's only ever been to get power from the motor housing to the motor shaft without getting tangled up with the infinite rotation. We've never actually seen a wireless power delivery into the wheel itself before. So the nerd inside me really liked that. It doesn't necessarily mean it's better.
It doesn't really change the experience.
It doesn't change the experience at all, no, but I do like the fact that there's no contact pads, there's no pins inside the wheel, so that, obviously removes the, the opportunity for wear and tear there. But it does add a lot of complexity in terms of the circuitry. So whether or not it's a improvement or it kind of is what it is.
But given the overall hardware quality and build quality of it, it's not a concern, is it?
No, I'm definitely not concerned about it. And I like the fact that we're seeing some innovation there. I like the fact that we're seeing something a little bit different. Yep. So hardware-wise, look, overall, I was really impressed with the products. I mean, we have to put it in context of the price, and they are expensive. So, we were expecting to see good high quality hardware, but I guess also quality aside with regards to the hardware, the form factor is really nice as well. So, I mean, they do look pretty much identical to the Simagic Alpha and Alpha Mini, as well as the Simucube 2 Sport and Pro. That may upset some people. I don't know exactly what the story is there in terms of why they are so similar, but we've got a nice slim form factor here, which means it doesn't take up a lot of space on the rig. You can get your monitor nice and low. You can sit your monitor behind it as well, because there's no cooling fans. And I do like the fact that we have a nice flush mounting surface on the front here, so you can use a front mount. There aren't any mounting holes in the sides or the bottom, and they don't have anything like a table clamp, which we do see with some other competitors, although at a lower force feedback level than what we're talking about with these products, generally speaking. But most rig manufacturers these days have some sort of a front mount option available for their rig anyway. So
we did try it out with the TRAK racer front mount, and that worked fine. Really
exactly. And of course, they do have the option of their own front mount to bottom mount adapter, which again had no flex in it and had plenty of adjustability. So
and I think it's really important that the small form factor of these units, it does make a real tangible difference to the experience, because the options you have with your monitor placement. I mean, I've got a DD1 on my rig, and it's huge. And it does make it difficult to get the monitor exactly where you want it. I've ended up sort of squeezing it between the wheelbase and the wheel, which is it's millimeters between touching. It's just hard work.
There's a lot more compromises that need to be made the bigger the footprint is of the wheelbase.
And it does change your experience. It changes the amount of immersion that you get.
Absolutely. And I think one of the products that we'll be comparing this to a little bit later on in today's video is the VRS Direct Force Pro, and that is a much bigger, bulkier footprint overall with cables out the side, and it isn't as easy to work with as these are, and I don't think that should be ignored, I guess, in the overall bigger picture. So overall, when it comes to the ET5 and ET3 wheelbases, gotta say, very impressed with the hardware overall,
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool.
How did you feel about the wheel hardware? hardware-wise?
So yeah, I mean, look, the wheel is exactly the same as we've seen with the Simagic wheels, the MOZA wheels now as well. There are some subtle differences in terms of the knobs that are being used, the configuration that we have in terms of analog hat switches, funky switches and things like that. But when it comes to the overall build quality, the materials used and all those things, the shifters, the paddles, it's again exactly the same pretty much as what we've seen from Simagic and from MOZA. But yeah, at $499 and also considering the high quality quick release that you do get, I think it ticks the boxes for the price.
Yeah, for a wheel with magnetic shifters and analog paddles as well, that's pretty good.
Yeah, and I mean there is a little bit of twist in the wheel rim itself. The material that they're using there maybe is a little bit weaker than what we get with, say, a Momo wheel, for example. But I think all the things that you would expect for the price are there. The RPM gauge works quite nicely. So if we were to compare to a similarly priced FANATEC wheel, for example, I think there are areas where this is better in terms of build quality. I think the buttons probably have a slightly nicer feel for the price. I like the fact that we've got anodized aluminium knobs. And yeah, I think that's the only thing that's really missing is just a display of some sort to give you things like telemetry data or access to a tuning menu to make fine tuning adjustments on the fly.
Yeah, I really like the backlit lights that can be used as flag alerts and those kinds of things. I really like how you can program them in to convey information to you as well as look cool.
Yeah, it's a really efficient way of, like you said, conveying extra information without adding clutter to the wheel. I think that's a really clever design.
Yeah, I really like that.
Yeah, so overall, I think, again, for the price, the wheel does a good job.
Yep.
So what about the software?
Software, in terms of layout, how it works, it's fine. It's fairly easy to use. Some of the terminology they use was open to interpretation, I guess.
That's a good way of putting it.
But then we did run into quite a number of issues. It crashed a bunch of times on us.
Yeah, I'd say the software was crashing on me probably at least 3 or 4 times per hour if I was fiddling around with it, which was frustrating. Yeah. I mean, it does open up again. You don't have to quit out of your sim or anything like that. But yeah, I guess you've got to put it down to the context of what we're doing here. So like I'm fine tuning and I'm adjusting, I'm making changes, and it was crashing all the time, which was really frustrating. But we didn't have any issues with the software actually crashing when we were in driving doing a race or something like that. So it seemed to be some sort of a glitch where you were making an adjustment and it didn't get the feedback that it wanted from the wheel, and it would sort of get into a death loop and then die.
Yeah, if things don't line up right exactly how it's expecting it seems to just freak out.
Exactly. I think that's, again, a good way of putting it. But yeah, when you're actually in there driving, the software did seem to be stable, and I'm sure that's something that they can address moving forward as well. So I don't think it's a major problem, but I mean, it was a part of the experience overall. We haven't had that with other software packages that we've tested, so we definitely need to call that out. What about in terms of making adjustments and, actually understanding what the various different settings mean?
As I said before, I mean, the terminology used is a bit funny.
Yeah.
But it was quite clear what things were doing given the tooltips that we had.
Yeah.
And if you make an adjustment on a slider, it can feel the changes.
That's right. Yeah.
Quite obviously. So
yeah. So it's just a matter of I don't think that it's like at face value it can seem quite overwhelming compared to some of the other software packages again that we've tested, but when you actually get in and you start to adjust stuff, you kind of get the cause and effect thing going on.
Yeah.
And you kind of get your head around it pretty quickly, I think. If you were to spend a good half hour sitting down and really kind of fine tuning.
Yeah, it's like just don't be afraid of moving things around. Just slide them up, slide them down, see what it does, and you'll get a feel.
Exactly. And the fact that they do have some presets there to get you started as well was good. I wasn't a big fan of the presets that were there, and that's been the case with many other wheelbases that we've tested as well. But at least it's a starting point and it gives you an understanding of what they're trying to achieve. And you can save profiles, you can share them with friends and things as well. So that is a good thing. And I'm sure that in time we'll see communities established where people will be sharing their settings and so forth as well. So that can only really improve over time as well.
Yeah.
I guess the one thing that was missing there compared to, say, MOZA, for example, was something like a mobile app, or again, like FANATEC, the ability to make adjustments on the fly from the wheel. So you do have to sort of alt-tab out of your game, or at least have the console up on a second screen or something like that to make adjustments, which isn't as user-friendly as other options which are available on the market. So that is an important consideration too.
Yeah, and I also kind of felt that there was maybe some parameters missing. You couldn't quite dial in exactly what you were after in certain situations. Certain textures you might not be able to hone in on as well as you can in some other pieces of software.
Yeah, I feel like the two things that really stood out to me there was not having the ability to set a maximum torque limit without scaling all the other force feedback as well.
So it was more like a hard limit.
Exactly, having some sort of a hard limit like what we saw in the MOZA software, for example. And also, I really liked that that equalizer that we had in the MOZA software. That worked really well. I was a little bit skeptical of that at first, but I actually did find it very, very useful. And I'd recommend you guys check out that MOZA R9 review video that we did just recently, because it goes into a lot of detail about exactly how that works. And that's something that I would like to see a lot of other manufacturers implement. The reason I call that out is we did have the detail enhancer slider with this, which I guess aims to achieve a similar kind of thing. But because you can't limit it to certain frequencies within the spectrum, what it ends up doing is it ends up introducing a lot of noise in areas that you don't want it, just to get the detail out of the areas that you do want it. So yeah, I think having the ability to really hone in on individual frequencies like we see with other manufacturers would definitely be a big area of improvement.
Yeah.
But I guess overall, to summarize the experience with the software before we get into the actual driving experience, I think these are all, they're not necessarily nitpicks. They are important things to the overall experience of owning the product, but they are definitely all things that should be able to be improved. It's certainly not something that's going to be like, well, it is the way it is and it's never going to change. So
no, exactly. There's no fundamental issues with the hardware here or anything like that.
Exactly.
That is a complete deal breaker for these kinds of things.
Yeah, and again, we made the reference when we did the MOZA review recently of, you know, what the DD1 and DD2 were like when they first released compared to what they're like now. It's a completely different experience. So I very much feel like, you know, and we'll get into this in more detail when we talk about the driving experience in just a moment, but I very much feel like the experience with this product overall is limited by the software and I guess the implementation of that rather than the physical hardware. So I think that if you do buy one of these, you know, while it may not be the best available for the price right now, it's definitely something that will improve over time.
Yeah, so that suggests that you feel like it is lacking somewhere in the driving experience?
Yeah, well, let's get into that now. So I guess, and again, we're putting this in the context of the price point here. So these are considerably more expensive than, say, you know, your CSL DD, your MOZA R9, for example. And look, force feedback is a very subjective thing. So I would definitely recommend you guys go watch part 2 if you haven't already seen it. That takes you through exactly the adjustments that we were making, what we were feeling through the wheel while we were making those adjustments. Everybody likes different things with their force feedback. So it is a very subjective thing. But having said that, I think there are some elements of force feedback which are fundamentally important, you know, to feel what's going on with the car accurately. And, you know, those really, I guess, aren't that subjective. They're things that you either have or you don't have. And I guess the overarching experience with both the ET3 and the ET5 was that it was always kind of a trade-off scenario. So if you wanted to have a lot of detail and a lot of strength, that came at the cost of having a more robotic and grainy kind of feel overall. We were able to achieve a smooth and refined overall feeling, but then that also dampened down the effects and made everything feel just kind of dull and soft, like you're driving a car with really, really thick sidewalls on the tires as opposed to, you know, lower profile tires. So again, it's going to depend on the types of cars that you're driving. But for me, I just felt like those trade-offs, again, when we consider the price point here and what else is available, you know, within that kind of price range, the experience just wasn't where I would want it to be in terms of the driving experience.
Yeah, I mean, the ET5, it has oodles of strength in there. You've got more torque in there than I need. And I think you felt the same, did you?
Yeah, I mean, I normally drive at around sort of 12 to 14 Newton meters, again, depending on the car that I'm driving. That's with my Simucube 2 Ultimate. I'm happy driving with the MOZA R9 or the CSL DD as well at that kind of 8 to 9 Newton meter range. I don't feel like I'm losing out on a whole lot. But, you know, if I had my choice and money wasn't a thing, I'd prefer to have that sort of 12 to 15 kind of Newton meter range.
Yeah, well, having that extra amount of torque does give you headroom.
It does.
It gives you more flexibility in what you can enhance below that. So it's almost like a higher power amplifier or something like that. You're not going to have as great a noise floor. So when you try and lift things up, the quality it's more clear.
Yeah, and that was definitely one of the things that I noticed going from the ET5 to the ET3 was that the ET5, if I crank that up to 17 Newton meters, I guess master volume inside, or maximum strength inside the software, then I was able to get a good balance between smoothness and overall strength and detail, although not perfect and not as good as we've had with other wheelbases. At that sort of 12 to 14, maybe up to even sort of 15 Newton meter strength range. Whereas when we moved across to the ET3, I found myself having to make adjustments that resulted overall in the strength peaking out at around sort of 5 to 6.5, 7 Newton meters. So we weren't taking full advantage of the entire dynamic range available with the base. And if we did crank that up, it very much came at the cost of, you know, getting that graininess or that robotic feeling. So I think really what it comes down to, at the 10 Newton meter level that we have here, we feel like we're very much limited by the software and firmware. We feel like we're not able to filter out enough of the noise to bring up the level of detail to the point where we're really taking full advantage of what we have available in terms of dynamic range with the motor. With the ET5, with its 17 Newton meters dynamic range, we're able to sort of work within its limits to get a lot more of that detail out. So we're able to get a better overall experience, even at the lower force feedback levels. But again, I think we need to reiterate here that all of these things do appear to be firmware and software based limitations. I don't think that there's fundamentally any issues with the motors themselves. A lot of other motors that we've tested over the years at lower price points have a fundamentally grainy feel to them, or torque ripple as you rotate the wheel, even when it's just energized, even when you don't have any force feedback going into it. We were able to dial that out entirely with both of these motors. So I think that, I guess to summarize there, both of these motors are capable of more than what is realized with the current implementation of the software, I think.
Yeah, it definitely seems to be that way, doesn't it?
Yeah, so I think if you were to buy one of these, maybe the experience that you have right now isn't representative of where it might be in the future. And again, looking back to the DD1, DD2 when they first released, I think it's a kind of a similar picture here. I think that, you know, people that maybe, you know, didn't like those and ended up selling them would be happy with them if they bought them today. And I think it's probably a similar thing with these now.
Yeah, and I guess another thing with the ET5, while we were able to dial out the graininess and still have the strength that we wanted and getting the details that we were comfortable with, there was still a sort of erratic kind of behavior in the center of the... Yeah,
that kind of notchiness where you feel the weight of the car as you rotate around, but then the transition from left to right has that kind of
there was something just inconsistent about the transition of weight.
I think, again, it's just down to the fact that we're having to make so many mitigating adjustments to try and, you know, filter out the things that are problematic.
Yeah, we've compromised.
That we're compromising in the areas where that actually provide that detail. So again, I think it's down to the firmware and software implementation. I think with more filtering and more refinedness in those algorithms, I think the full potential of both of these motors would be better realized. So before we wrap things up, I think it's important to do a bit of a comparison with some of the competitor products which are available on the market at relatively similar price points. So look, in terms of the driving experience with the ET3, because of those limitations and the fact that we actually did end up with weaker peak force feedback than the full dynamic range available on the motor, my point of comparison ended up being the CSL-DD, GT-DD Pro and MOZA R9. We don't have experience with the Simagic Alpha Mini, unfortunately, so we can't compare with that directly. We do have experience with the Alpha, which we'll compare to the ET5 in just a minute. But I'd have to say that overall, while the build quality and physical hardware presentation is higher with the ET3 than it is on any of those products, the overall driving experience and the experience using the software on the CSL-DD, GT-DD Pro and the MOZA R9 are all subjectively better, in my opinion, with those bases than they are with the ET3, and they are also a lot cheaper than this is as well. So I think that there is a lot of unrealized potential in the ET3 as it stands right now, but we can only review what we've been sent, and at this point in time, my honest opinion is I would choose either one of those products over this one.
And considering this is significantly more expensive as well, it's not just a small amount, so yeah.
That's it. So that's my take on the ET3 at this point in time, at least. And again, we will revisit this later on down the track and see how things improve over time. And let us know in the comments if you do own one of these as well, what's your experience been like? Do you agree with us? A lot of this stuff is so subjective that it really does, value the viewers to get to get opinions of you guys down in the comments as well that do have experience with these products. So onto the ET5 now. My points of comparison with that would be the Alpha Mini, the VRS Direct Force Pro, which we reviewed a little while back, the FANATEC DD1, and of course the Simucube 2 Sport. So what were your feelings? You use the FANATEC DD1 every day on your rig, so you've got quite a lot of experience with it. What would your take be on that?
Yeah, well, I guess aside from the obvious benefits of the FANATEC ecosystem with the, large range of wheels and all that sort of thing,
console compatibility as well.
Yeah, exactly. So. There's a lot that is very valuable in just that overall ecosystem compared to what you can get here. But in terms of driving experience, got to say the DD1 is a long way ahead of this, where it's at the moment. So operating at similar torque levels, I just wasn't able to get the detail out of this that I've been able to do with the DD1. You just have that noise floor here that makes you need to compromise so much to get the characteristics that you do want. Whereas with the DD1, which is peak 20 Newton meters.
Yep.
I'm only really using it around 12 to 14.
Yep.
But you've got all that headroom, which seems to just enable you to bring up the detail without any added noise or graininess. You do have that slight rippling in the DD1, but because of its consistency, I find that I just zone out of that. Like, I'm not going to deny that it's there and it is not ideal. You can make this feel much smoother than a DD1, but that's going to be at the expense of a lot of detail.
Now, of course, with the DD1, you do have a much bulkier design physically that limits your options in terms of mounting, and we discussed that earlier. The other thing I would say is that, and we've done this to death with the reviews that we're doing recently, but this NRG style quick release is, in my opinion, and feel free to disagree, completely superior to FANATEC's QR1 system.
I don't think many people would disagree with that. The QR1 for the FANATEC, it seems outdated now, doesn't it?
Yeah, well, look, I mean, I guess to put it in perspective, that is a quick release system that's been around for a very long time now. They are working on the QR2. We don't know how much that's going to cost or when it's going to be available. I'm sure that that will address, you know, if not all the issues, then most of them that people have with the QR1. Those issues being, you know, broken pins, a little bit of flex there. But to put it in perspective, the QR1 system was developed back when FANATEC were making much weaker wheelbases in terms of physical strength than what they're making now. And their backs are kind of up against the wall a little bit because they're having to maintain compatibility with their back catalogue of wheels, but do so in a way that allows them to have stronger force feedback as well. And the fact of the matter is that when a lot of those wheels were designed, they weren't designed with 20, 25 Newton meters in mind. So it's always going to be a bit of a, you know, a little bit of a trade-off there. So I would say for me, the ET5 is a more refined product in terms of its hardware. We just need to wait for the software to catch up.
That's it. And any negative impact on driving experience from the QR1 in the FANATEC, it's nothing like the impact that you're getting from not being able to dial in the force feedback that you want.
So if you had the choice between a DD1 or the ET5, you would choose the DD1?
Yeah, it would definitely be the DD1 in my mind.
At least at this point in time.
Exactly.
So we'll see where this goes. We may end up revising that over time because I do think that this is the better hardware overall.
It seems to be,
But driving experience right now, which is what's important, DD1 has the edge. So in terms of comparison with other products, VRS Direct Force Pro, we reviewed that quite a while ago now. And look, we were really overall impressed with that. It did have very limited software at that point in time. It didn't have a lot of the interpolation filters that we see on, say, Simucube, for example, but it did deliver a very smooth, very refined driving experience without the compromises that were necessary in terms of detail that we have here. But in saying that, it is a very big, bulky product. You don't have the versatility in terms of mounting your screens close and you know, those things. So, and you do also have a lot of additional expense there. If you look at them on paper next to each other, they look quite similar in price, again, depending on where you are in the world. But with the VRS Direct Force Pro, you do have to buy extra hub adapters, quick releases, and things like that, and the cost can add up quite quickly. So, but yeah, again, if it's purely just down to driving experience, I would choose the Direct Force Pro over this. But again, that may change as the ET5 evolves over time. So, Simagic Alpha, I think very much a similar experience, wasn't it?
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of similarities we can draw on, both hardware-wise and driving experience-wise, I think.
Yeah, I think that the Simagic overall had the more refined driving experience, though. I feel like they've got their filters and their algorithms maybe a little bit more dialed in.
Yeah, I mean, their software was more reliable, for one.
Yeah, I don't think the software was as well presented, but it was definitely more reliable. And again, that was quite some time ago that we reviewed the Alpha, so I'm sure that they have brought things along. Unfortunately, we don't have the Alpha here anymore, so we can't do another direct comparison. That was just a loan unit from a reseller. We would have loved to have been able to sort of put them head to head, but we just can't do that, unfortunately. But based on the experience that we had with the Alpha at the time, I would say the Alpha does have a edge when it comes to the driving experience, but otherwise, wheel quality, hardware quality, very, very similar.
Yeah.
So lastly, the Simucube 2 Sport, which actually comes in at exactly the same peak Newton meters as this and looks very similar to boot as well.
It does, yeah.
So we reviewed that quite some time ago. Again, we don't have the Sport and the Pro here anymore. I drive every day with the Ultimate base, but we did do a detailed review and comparison between all three of those models quite some time ago now. I would definitely recommend go back and watch that review. Now, I actually went back and watched it myself just to kind of refresh my memory on what my takes were at the time. And the main thing that stood out to me when I did that review was just how close the performance was obviously peak strength aside between the Sport, the Pro, and the Ultimate. I expected that the Ultimate, being so much more expensive than the Sport and the Pro, would be, you know, miles and miles and miles ahead in terms of, you know, every aspect of the driving experience, not just the strength. And what I actually found in reality is that with a blind test, I felt like if I was blindfolded, and I was working on my own at the time, so I couldn't really do it, but if I was blindfolded, I would have had a real hard time telling the difference at the same Newton meter level. It was purely just down to the slew rate of the motor or the response time, how sharp those responses were. Aside from that, it was very, very, very hard to tell. So while the ET5 does come in that little bit cheaper than the Simucube 2 Sport does, and it does offer the same peak Newton meters, very, very similar hardware quality in terms of build as well. Again, I'd have to give it to the Simucube 2 Sport. The driving experience is just superior. I mean, it does take quite a lot of fine tuning. One of the things that I don't like about Simucube bases is that they do have quite a lot of variance between different sim titles. So you do have to really take the time to dial in each car, dial in each sim. The out-of-the-box experience isn't fantastic. Now, they have improved that with their online cloud-based profile system, so you can actually download other people's profiles and try them out. That has definitely made the experience with Simucube a lot less intimidating over time. And that's actually a video that we need to do pretty soon, is having a look at that newer TrueDrive software and going through it again. But yeah, at this point in time, I just can't recommend this over the Simucube 2 Sport for a similar kind of price. I mean, if you can get this way, 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 way cheaper, then maybe. But yeah, again, it just comes down to that driving experience not being at the level where I believe this physical hardware is capable.
That's it, and it does just come back to that hoping that the software catches up with the hardware on this.
Yeah. So I think that's pretty much everything that we can offer in terms of our conclusions and comparisons today. So I really hope that this video series has helped you out. If you haven't already seen them, please do check out part 1 and part 2. That'll give you a much clearer understanding of all the testing that we've done and allow you to draw your own conclusions based on what you see. So yeah, guys, thank you very much for watching. Thank you very much to Immsource as well for sending these across to us to check out. And this is definitely something that we'll be keeping an eye on over time to see how it evolves. I think that, yeah, at this point in time, the driving experience just doesn't quite match the quality of the hardware, but that is something that can be fixed. And at the end of the day, you've got to say it's great to see another high quality piece of hardware on the sim racing market. Definitely can't do any harm. So we'll see where it goes. So if you found these videos helpful, please do leave a thumbs up. Consider subscribing to the channel as well if you haven't already. Only about 30% of the people that watch these videos are actually subscribed. Did you know that?
So? I didn't know that.
So it really does go a long way to help out the channel. And the more people that we can reach, the more people that we can potentially help out with the decision-making process. Yeah. So it all helps. So thank you very much, guys. We will see you again in the next one. Bye.
See ya.